Well, hello and welcome to the Church Office Podcast. My name is Gavin Smith, and it's a joy today to welcome you to our Admin and Ops podcast. We love talking about the ministry behind the scenes, and we love to get guests on, and we love to spend time with people who have excellence in these areas. And my guest today is Rachel Slough. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Gavin. Lovely to be here.
It's going to be great. And Rachel will tell us a little bit about what she does. So she's a consultant, works in business. She's also working in churches, and we're going to glean a lot of knowledge from her today. So super excited to have her on the podcast. Before we get into our topic, which is today's going to be talking about kind of managing change in churches. So really interesting topic. I want to give a big shout out to our sponsors at Church Suite. A big thank you to Gavin and the team at Church Suite who sponsor the podcast. It means that we can do this for free. It means that we can bless people. And so really big thank you to those guys. If you've not heard of Church Suite, then please go and check them out, churchsuite.com. It's a brilliant piece of software that every church needs, some kind of tool to manage their data, to communicate well with people, to do rotas, kids sign in, to do their planning for their services. There are so many modules that fit together to make churches effective. A church office needs it, and we use Church Suite. Lots of churches across the country use it. So highly recommend it. And not just the product, but the people that I've met, the support that goes on behind the scenes to help people. Their heart for local churches and their heart really for mission is something that really drives them to be better. And I really appreciate that about them. So Church Suite, you've heard of Church Suite, I assume, Rachel?
Of course, absolutely. Mostly positively too. So it's the go-to tool for churches, isn't it? Definitely.
Yeah, it's great. So we're talking about managing change. Let me intro you first. So we've met through UCAN, basically, so the UK Church Administrators Network, and you're speaking at our conference in the summer, and you are the go-to person for so many things about consultancy and helping us to think differently. The tagline in your at the bottom of your email is "No apology for disrupting your thinking." I love that. So tell us a bit about yourself, Rachel, and what you're involved in.
Well, so I'm glad you've put my strap line in first, Kevin, because
I love that.
maybe in some of what we talk about today will disrupt people's thinking about how they deal with change. I'd spent time in corporate operations. I was an operations director for a company for 20 years. So I'm very passionate about logistics and operations and things working well. And I chose to take redundancy. Got an interesting story about failure in a business and all of that stuff. But out of that came opportunity to rethink what I did and how I contributed. And I really felt God calling me to not traditional training, but facilitation and encouraging people to really think on a personal level. That's coaching or working with organizations on leadership development and talent development, and helping organizations think carefully, strategically, disruptively, but in a positive and healthy way. And I'm very passionate about enabling and equipping people to do what they do. And so I've been working consultancy for the last nearly 12 years now, and running my own consultancy for the last 8. And I love what I do. Lots of that's international, lots of that's with very mixed international teams, helping people understand and work more effectively together. And that takes a bit of disruption sometimes to then land and settle well. But I love it. I'm very grateful to God for the opportunities I have to work across many things. Some of those are easy, some are quite tricky, but definitely where I'm supposed to be.
I love that. And to have you on a podcast with that wealth of kind of knowledge and understanding. I know you've taught at universities and you've got various things, and you run a course, don't you, with UCAN? And your heart to serve the church is totally evident in everything that I've seen in the conversations. Fill us in a little bit about that. If someone's listening and thinking, actually, I'd like to connect in, develop my skills in leadership.
So obviously I'm a vicar's kid, so I come from a kind of church background, so kind of understand that from very early on in my life. But certainly in my own experiences of church, and I've been involved in quite big churches, in HR and operations. And I just really had a passion to see us equip operational people more
Yeah.
effectively. You know, vicars and clergy and don't often go through kind of management training of any sort. And yet many of these big churches have large teams and big
Yeah.
operations. And I really thought, actually, as a church, if we can't do HR and operations well, then who should? And we
Yeah.
should be setting the example for that. So I really felt really strongly about creating a course that is accredited. I have a very good relationship with the Institute of Leadership and Management, so it's a degree level course, so it's got good recognition behind it. But
Yeah.
it looks at the issues that we face in church with a biblical view,
Yeah.
a prayerful journey alongside that. And I really wanted to bring people from across the country together
Yeah.
to share, to support, to challenge one another. It's a lovely thing about working in church. We're not in competition.
Yeah.
There aren't any other organisation I work with where everyone would send their different people from different
Yeah.
organisations. And we really look at what does it mean to support from that second chair view in translating strategy into
Yeah.
action, supporting those who are the visionaries into making stuff a reality, the important and real challenge of ops, and really just equipping people with tools, with time to think, and time
Yeah.
to build connection and relationship with others. And we're on cohort 5 now.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is amazing, because I won't name names, but I met some people early on who said, "Oh, we don't need that in church. It's never going to work.
Yeah.
It's not needed." And how can people in business really understand church? Well, I think cohort 5 says it all really.
Yeah.
And we've stayed in touch with many of those people who
Yeah.
either moved on to bigger churches. Yeah, some people have moved to other kind of roles, but it's been such a joy and a privilege. It's probably my kind of favorite cohort. I don't get to pray or journey alongside people in the same way in my
Yeah.
corporate life, so it's really important in this. And just, yeah, we just see people flourish,
Yeah.
and that's what we're called to do.
Yeah, I love that. And so, yes, this is an accredited course. If you're interested in finding out more, then go and check out the UCAN website, and you can find all the information on there. And Penny and I were chatting about you and the course and this cohort that you've got going now, and it's just there was just so much joy every time you chat to someone who goes in and does this. And if you're really thinking, look, I've got some knowledge in the areas of administration and operations, but you really want to develop in that leadership gift and what the kind of leadership looks like in this role, then this course is super helpful, and you can find that. And the accreditation is great, and for workplaces, it's a brilliant step, isn't it, to invest in someone into this? So, um,
100%. You know, some people worry about, oh, I've got to do written work, but actually, the written work is about reflecting on your workplace. So you're
yeah,
really putting learning into reflective practice and then practice for change. And
yeah,
we've seen some amazing things happen as a result. And we've had some pastors and vicars on our course too.
yeah.
So it's not exclusively ops people. Because I think there's a real need. I don't see anybody who doesn't want to do what they do in church really, really well.
Yeah. And I think conversation time and time again with vicars and senior leaders is, their training is front loaded, their training is theological, it's not management, it's not leadership. And some of the things that they get themselves into, in those first 5 years of ministry are, some of the worst and some of the most
Yeah,
challenging. And you look on and you say, well, there's no wonder, because you've never been shown anything different. You've never had to lead a team of, 4 or 5 people on staff. And that seems like a small number, but actually that's quite
yeah,
a bit of work when you've
100%.
never managed anyone else before. So the people side of stuff is the hardest work, isn't it, in any organization, I'm sure.
Yeah.
um
I think most people say they could do their job if it wasn't for the people around them, and I don't think that's any different in church.
there's a
Um,
bit of truth in that, isn't there?
and we
Yeah.
are wonderfully and uniquely made, but that can be a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. And so when we were talking about the podcast, and we're talking about kind of managing change today, it's no different for churches, is it? Maybe start there.
Yeah, I mean, is it? Yeah, I don't think change is. It's not necessarily any harder or different because it's church, but I think church is more complex and it's more sensitive, and we engage with people in a different way than we do in the corporate world. And if you were saying to me who does it really well, then I'd struggle a bit to find really good examples
Yeah,
because
yeah,
leading change effectively and consistently well is hard for everybody.
Yeah.
But I think in church, we've got staff, we've got volunteers, we've got the congregation, we've got our reputation in the
Yeah.
place that we operate in, and people look at the church in the wider community. Change in church, I think, it's more complex.
Yeah.
The consequences if we get it wrong are bigger, because it's about belonging and trust and all of those
Yeah.
things, tradition, relationships that
Yeah.
in some ways don't impact the corporate world in quite the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. I was jotting down just before we started, just thinking, what are some of the things that in our church are changing? So we've got
Mm,
a leader who's, was the founder, who's transitioning and retiring. So we've got a transition of leadership. We've got a change in our facility and how it's being used. We've got a new coffee shop rather than what we had before, which was just
mm,
an open
mm.
space for people, where you're almost running a little bit of a business in the church now, and that's a change.
Ooh,
And adapting, and then the knock-on effect of that changes, like we're having to do our kind of chair layout differently, and we're having to bring coffee stations into the main hall, and it's a self-serve basis rather than coming to a hatch. And I just started to make a list of all those things, yeah, I had like 15 things on there already. And actually that's kind of just normal, isn't it, in church life?
yeah, yeah, and things kind of sneak in almost without us thinking about how we plan for them, and we've forgotten things have changed until people start complaining or
Yeah.
gently moaning that it's not the same as
Yeah.
it used to be. Um, and you go, well, that's because we needed some change. But yeah, yeah, there are things that say I see it. I think I see it in church quite a bit too. Just a simple setup of something can just,
Yeah.
yeah, make people feel a bit, oh, this feels uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a big topic for us, I think. So
Mm,
um what are you seeing then, churches? Why is this so challenging? And um what can advice for us? On the
oof,
podcast we've got leaders, we've got ops people
yeah.
who are managing, and we might have somebody who's a treasurer or a trustee or a PCC member, so we've got a wider range of people. Yeah, talk into this then for us,
Yeah, I
Rachel.
think could sound a bit corporate when I talk about, church is full of stakeholders, but it is full of
Yeah.
our stakeholders. It's full of people who've got an emotional connection.
Yeah.
And that'll vary
Yeah.
across people, and in some ways, that is quite different than the normal workplace where you could say, "Well, I don't like this change, so I'll leave. I'll find somewhere else," because it
Mm.
doesn't impact your life in quite the way
Yeah.
that church
Yeah.
can. And I think
Yeah.
that in church, people are responding because they care, and
Yes.
is a place where they come for perhaps reassurance. It's where they come to connect. It's where they come for their community. It's got a very different, it's relationally in a very different place where it
Mm.
should be. I hope it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And people are spiritually invested in what's happening in a change. And that is completely different from the normal
Yeah.
workplace. And so I think change can feel probably more significant
Yeah.
in church because it's not just about strategy or the structure or something. It's much more, it's much wider than that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think in church we often think, well, the vision's great, so everyone's on board with the vision. So what's the problem with the change?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
people go, oh, hang on a minute, I didn't know it was going to look like this. I was all up for the vision, but now you're going to change the chairs, Gavin. You're going to get rid of where I used to sit. Well, I'm not quite so
Yeah.
enthusiastic anymore because now it's really impacting me. And so I think people lose familiarity,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then that begins to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, and I would say this for any organization, but I highlight it for church, is good change has to start with understanding that it's not about just what's being gained, it's also what we lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people, if you underestimate that, believe me, people will tell you what they'll lose. And if they don't
Yeah.
get a chance to tell you, they'll make you feel deeply uncomfortable that you've made them uncomfortable. And for some people, I think they don't always recognize they've lost something, and what they're reacting to is the fact that they've lost it, but they
Yeah.
might not be able to articulate it. And from what I've seen, I think that's worse in church than it is in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're talking here about it feels different, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're talking about the cost here of what it's going to take.
Yeah.
So we see this vision, and yeah, we're on board, but now suddenly it impacts me in a certain way, or yeah, and I'm now I've got to kind of work through that. And people aren't great at working through those things, are they, on their own?
No, not usually. Not usually. Not usually. They're not. No, it doesn't. Yes, I think better outcomes come from consultation and discussion with others than trying to
Yeah.
work it through.
And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because someone's listening to this podcast might be going, "Well, I'm from a quite a congregational led church
Mm,
where they vote on everything, and
mm,
there is a sense of consultation and being involved in it. And where others, we've got leadership teams that are very strong in terms of how they lead, and the like the diversity of all of that. So your structure of leadership actually makes quite a big difference here, doesn't it?
yeah.
In how people feel, in terms of what they're losing, and what the
Yeah, and
gain is as well.
I think change in church, unlike the kind of world change, is that there's a history to church,
Yeah,
isn't there? And
yeah,
there's memory, and
yeah,
for many people, their church has been where they've been for years, and so someone new may be coming in, being really enthusiastic about how something's going to change, and people going, "Oh yeah, but you don't know what it was like, or
mm,
you don't understand the
mm,
history here, or why people feel so strongly about such and such."
yeah,
And I think that is different. And is something we underestimate a bit and is worth just giving a bit of thought.
yeah,
And we can be, yeah, very enthusiastic about, right, it's time for change, we're all up for that. But we have to take that in the context too of what's the history and what's the relevance and the importance of certain things. And
mm,
I was in a church quite some time ago, but someone had changed the lectern,
okay,
and it probably needed change. It needed something that moved with height and all the all
yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
clever important stuff. And I am not as tall as you, Gavin. So, but having something you can
yeah,
adjust makes sense. But in this church, it had been a legacy piece, the
yeah,
previous lectern from somebody,
yeah,
and it caused so much
yeah,
upset that kind of in part was unnecessary. But I felt for the leader because they didn't
mm,
know. They were
yeah,
new,
yeah,
and thought this was a good thing and hadn't appreciated. And I think in church we have to pause a little bit
yeah,
and just be clear. Is there a story? Is there history? Is there memory here? That
yeah,
doesn't mean we don't change, but we take that with a little bit more pastoral,
yeah,
discerning sense in how we deliver change or do something that feels quite simple, but the ripple effect can be
yeah.
take a lot longer to put right.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I don't know if you've come across that where leaders have been given advice before of kind of, you're a new leader joining a church or coming in, walk the walls for the first three
Mm,
months, don't make any changes. And
mm,
and, and that's often a bit of advice, isn't it, that
mm,
comes. But actually, what the point you're making there as well, isn't it, is that you really have to, before you look forward, you do have to look back, don't you? You do
mm,
have to
mm.
understand the history. You do have to be able to, what is really important to this congregation or this church.
Yeah.
And so it does take it. And I think most visionary leaders that I've met don't tend to deal with these things quite delicately,
Mm,
do they?
mm.
They don't tend to. And you've probably met a few like that.
Yeah, in my coaching role, I coached a vicar some time ago, but we were talking about he was brilliant at being on the other side of the river, in effect.
Yeah,
Like, come
yeah,
join me, it looks amazing over here. You should see. And people standing
yeah,
on the other side going, it doesn't look that green to me over there.
yeah, yeah,
And we talked about, what are the stepping stones? We need visionary leaders.
yeah.
We
We
need
do.
people who
Yeah,
see a future for the vision. And I think in our current climate, the way we live, we need stability, but we
yeah,
also need people who adapt and flex and can see. But we've got
yeah,
to bring people with us. And in church, you've got to bring them even more so than we
yeah,
do in the corporate world. People say, well, I'm off, find someone
yeah,
else. But
yeah,
I think in church we need, and I think a lot of clergy are very and pastors and leaders of church that are very visionary,
yeah,
um, and that's important. We need that,
yeah,
but we need people to understand, well, how do I help others see that
yeah,
too?
yeah,
Um, and sometimes it helps to provide the stepping stones or the I don't know if you have a favorite journey, Gavin. I have certain favorite journeys that I drive, and
Yeah.
I know each bit
Yeah.
along the route, whether I'm nearer
Yeah.
or closer, or I've hit a
Yeah.
jam. And I go, oh no, I've got an hour and a half now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
or actually, oh, people tell me keel services are what they look forward to. Quite frankly, I don't see it myself. It's a little bit of right. We're on the way. We're getting there. We
Yeah.
see,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that is the challenges of how do we drip feed people, give people the little markers on the journey that it's not going to happen tomorrow
Yeah.
and just be done. But how can we gradually, and some of that, as you say, is right. We need to hear the story, what's happened here in the past, and how do
Yes.
we weave that into why we need, if it's a big change, why we need change to happen.
Yeah.
And I think we often present to people that we want change, we want vision, da 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 da
Yeah.
da. But it's important to pace that well. I
Yeah.
think when you pace change well, it lands and embeds.
Yeah. And I think if you were to ask a leader of a church, a kind of senior leader of a church, like what are your top kind of 5 things that you are responsible for, that you really need to be thinking about and giving yourself to, they would give themselves to the word,
Yep.
protecting the flock,
Mm, mm.
caring, teaching, bringing some direction, they would naturally just move to that. I think few leaders would go, oh yeah, it's my responsibility to lead change.
Yep. Yeah. I think you're probably yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment actually. I
Yeah.
don't think they and some people say, oh, that sounds very corporate, but
Yeah.
I think it probably is not the language we use very well. We talk about vision and
Yeah.
mission, and our great, you know, the Great Commission. But I
Yeah.
don't think we talk about change per se. I think you're right. I don't
Yeah.
think it's a language that's used so well.
Yeah, that's so true. And so give us some thoughts then on, like, as people listening to the podcast, reflecting on, because we all manage change to a certain degree, don't we, in our
Yeah.
roles, particularly those listening to the podcast. Like, give us some examples of where leaders have often gotten this wrong,
Ooh,
and that will help us to reflect
yeah.
a little bit on this. We can go to the positive after, but yeah, let's start there. The negative.
Yeah, well, I think as I said before, I think what's one of the biggest things I see go wrong is leaders have often had more time to think about the change. They can see it coming.
Okay.
So they kind of see the destination. They're almost always there.
Yeah.
And then they're trying to tell people about, the change they want, and people aren't there yet. And so actually what they're trying to process, well, what's going to end in the change that's
Yeah.
coming?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the first challenges I see is often there's not enough consultation, it's not enough collaboration, the communication is unclear and not repeated enough. People don't
Yeah.
hear enough of why and what and
Yeah.
how. And I
Yeah.
think those things are often missed. And people, if you've got a visionary leader who's excited about change, well, they may not be bothered about all the other bits that are going to get in the way to get there.
Yeah.
So their communication of the change can be exciting for them and frightening for the person receiving it,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
That's kind of on the worst. But I think it is, how would I sum it up? I think is, we don't just change things. It's about how the change is led.
Yeah.
And our leadership in change is got to be key.
Mm.
And somebody asked me, in my professional career, I had to close down a division. And someone said, how did you do that? Well, how
Mm.
did you lead that
Mm.
change? When I
Mm.
didn't know quite what the full outcome was going to be, or the timing of that.
Yeah.
I think I commented that my Starbucks bill was a lot higher than it normally was, but there was a lot of meeting people and having coffee and
Yeah.
just, I often say, if you're a fan of feeding the birds, you've got to kind of scatter the seed. You've got to
Mm.
kind of gradually let people know what's going on. Um, what do I see go wrong? I think probably is that, and underestimating the loss. People don't acknowledge
Yeah.
the loss. What are we
Yeah.
going to lose in this change?
Mm.
And, I'm sure you can perhaps think of an occasion when you thought you're so excited about something changing, you kind of hadn't quite appreciated what you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And I can certainly, say that for myself. There are times, and I'm pretty optimistic. I'm visionary. I get quite excited about change. I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm a kind of change lover generally.
Yeah.
And I've certainly had times thinking, oh gosh, I didn't know it wasn't going to work like that anymore by getting this
Yeah.
new fancy way of doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or yeah, and so loss is really key.
Yeah.
And I think leaders underestimate loss, either
Yeah.
because they don't value it or they haven't spoken to people. What are you going to lose in this change?
Yeah.
And I see that in people I coach with. I see that in organizations I work for. Um, I had went to a dinner party just recently and sat next to someone who just led an organization through some change, and he said, "Does it really matter, Rachel, where the coffee machine is?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, yeah.
It might
Tell
for
me
those
where your
people.
coffee machine is now." And he said, "Well, it's a floor down from where it used to be." I said, "So tell me why that's an issue." And
Yeah.
it was just kind of talking through. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you got to walk somewhere else. You got to take more time. It's that bit of, not that everybody then says we don't want it, but they do you know that? And I
Mm.
think those are probably really important things to think about.
Yeah.
Is where are you just setting the destination and not the journey, and have you thought about what the loss will be as well as the gain?
Yeah.
And that's really really key stuff, I think.
And I can hear my wife having this conversation with me because when I get excited about launching something new, and and I'm not getting the response that I'd hoped for.
Yeah,
And she'll say to me, Gav, you've been thinking about this for 3 months. You've been talking about this.
yeah.
This is the first time someone's heard it, and you're expecting them to be
Mm,
jumping up and down,
mm.
going, "Oh, Gavin, this is a life-changing idea. Why didn't we do this sooner?" And you're like, "It's just never going to happen." And I can hear that conversation as we have it in the kitchen, and we all, we're all suspect to this. We are. I am the same. And you're right. What you're alluding to there, isn't it? Is the care of
Yeah,
people, isn't
yeah,
it? That's the
yeah,
that's the key thing here,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah,
Absolutely. And people often say, "Oh, people resist change," and I think no, they don't resist change. What they resist is a lack of consultation and collaboration.
yeah.
I didn't see this coming. Where's that come from? Or, yeah,
Why are
when
we
did you
doing
have that
this?
idea?
Yeah,
And so you hit resistance because people haven't felt any part of that. And then, of course, as I said, they go to what they feel they're losing.
yeah,
And often there's a story of loss. In
yeah,
resistance of change, you'll often find the underlying factor is something that people have lost in that.
yeah,
And so I think it's important to appreciate that and talk to people.
yeah,
Just people often say, "Oh, we haven't got time to consult and collaborate. We just got to make it happen." And I think, well, where do you want to hit the resistance then?
yeah, yeah.
Because
Absolutely right.
if you just charge ahead, your chance to implement change will happen much slower.
Yeah,
That and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
from my
yeah,
experience. It's what
yeah,
theorists will tell you. And
yeah,
I think in church, I mean, it can be costly in church because people walk and they walk with the money that supports the church.
yeah, yeah. And they disengage, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so. Yeah, it is absolutely so true. And so yeah, it's such an important part of leadership, isn't it?
mm,
It is because
yeah,
it is. We live in a world that constantly changes, and
yeah,
yeah, things in church will always be that way.
yeah,
And the message will stay the same. And I keep saying that over and over again. The message will stay the same,
yeah,
but our methods will change as we
yeah,
try and reach a culture that
yeah,
that is growing, further and further away from the gospel. And that is a reality, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
Anything else on that then? Kind of where things have gone
I
wrong?
think it's yeah. I think it. I my kind of view on these things, Gavin, is trying to keep it as simple as possible, and it is that
Yeah,
bit of how do we help people be a part of the story of the vision that's coming?
yeah,
They feel uh, they've got time to get used to that. And how do we acknowledge, and that's a bit about emotional intelligence as well,
yeah,
because
yeah,
those of us who just love the whole let's just get on with it, it's amazing, we
yeah,
don't want to talk about stuff that's difficult, like, well, what will happen with this, and where am I going to park, or
yeah,
where
yeah,
where where are people going to hang their coats now, and
yeah,
you think, oh, for goodness sake. and
yeah,
and so our emotional intelligence is also really important, and we have to be honest, if there's language that we don't really like because it sounds like resistance,
yeah,
we might need to do a bit of preparation for that.
yeah, yeah,
um and I see often leaders who just they're not comfortable hearing difficult stuff,
yeah,
and they feel that that kills the dream.
yeah,
And I think sometimes it's the tension between leaders of churches and their ops people.
yeah. It
You're
can be
expecting
that.
me to
Yeah,
make this happen. Well, hang on a minute. What about it? And
yeah,
there has to be a bit of grace in between the message and the receiver, etc. But
yeah,
I also think that we need to be prepared that not everyone maybe is excited as we are. And even an exciting change, even stuff that people have been asked,
Yeah.
we've got to have this.
Yeah.
Can this happen? When's it going to happen?
Yeah.
There is still a, oh gosh, I didn't realize. Oh yeah, I hadn't realized. I hadn't appreciated that. And we just need to
Yeah.
allow a bit of room for that. And where do I see people who've perhaps done that more successfully? They have made sure they engage people in the shape of the change,
Yeah.
in what's coming, that they've consulted. And not just consulted at the beginning, they've consulted a bit further in, saying, hang on a
Yeah.
minute, is there anything we missed? What have you lost? And
Yeah.
the consultation bit, collaborating with others is just so key
Yeah.
to moving things. And it might move a bit slower, but I see successful change as a result of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's helpful, isn't it? And leaders who are able to kind of read the room,
Yeah.
that emotional intelligence of what you're saying, of how they're coming across,
Yeah.
who else is, the message that people are receiving, as you communicate change. I've got a particular staff member on our team who, she will ask, when you make an announcement and change, you're going to do something differently. She's got 25 questions,
Yeah.
and it can feel quite negative.
Yeah.
But actually, what she's trying to do is she wants to get behind it, but she's trying to figure out what
Yeah.
you are. And I think some of the stuff that we've done in the past around five voices are how people are receiving and hearing this, and how the kind of personality they are, the kind
Yeah.
of traits that they might have, are going to respond differently. And it doesn't mean that they're resistant, but it just means they're going to take a bit more time. So our pace has got to change.
Yeah.
The way we run at something and the pace that we want to run as a leader has to alter. And I think you picked up on some good things. And we see those tensions, don't we, between ops people and leaders.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
feel like the handbrake a lot of the time,
Yeah.
and relationally it breaks down there. And that's where this starts getting messy, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
definitely. Definitely. And I think repetition can feel a bit boring. Consultation can feel a bit boring, especially if you're somebody who wants to move at a fast pace. But often I'll say to people, change needs to happen at the person who's most resistance pace,
yeah, yeah,
because they'll often be the people who, once you've got them on board, they could be your strongest supporter.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and often I led an away day recently, and someone said, "Oh, it's a bit slower than I thought." And I said, "We have to go at the pace of the least comfortable person in the room.
yeah,
Otherwise, you hit that resistance."
yeah,
And often I think resistance isn't about rebellion. It isn't about people, fighting. It's just because something for them is about grief or fear or uncertainty. And
yeah,
so we've got to just go, okay, how do we just sort that out so that we
yeah,
keep moving
yeah,
forward? And
yeah,
I think that is it. Often I think people think change happens and on we go, and I say change is when we make a decision to do something different. Transition is the process for change actually implementing and embedding, and
yeah,
if we
yeah,
underestimate the transition period, then we get into trouble.
yeah. And that is helpful to think through
Mm.
that, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
What do we need along the way?
Yeah. And how do you move people with you is a really important question. Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you seen that's been good practice then? Of bringing people, communicating clearly, bringing good leadership into this. Like, what have you seen that's gone? Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think when there's been bigger changes, definitely a very consistent message.
Yeah,
It hasn't wavered. Often I'll say to people, if you don't communicate anything and there's a gap, people will make it fill the gap with something that's not true. And then
yeah,
people haven't got anything to say. Well, then say you haven't got anything to say.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Don't
yeah, yeah,
don't have a good comms plan, and that's where you get that complement of skills in church of people who say, how do we plan this well?
mm,
I see people who write great plans but don't talk about communication in it.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
planned for
yeah,
activity.
yeah,
So, I mean, my kind of general view is there are kind of three C's, and the first one is consultation. Consult
yeah,
people. What do you think? How do you feel about this? Particularly key people.
mm,
People want to feel a part of something. They don't want it just dropped on them. So, and that might be a small number of people you need to consult with. It might be a whole church at your APCM or something. But
yeah,
consultation is really key. I can't underestimate that for you. I think then too, it's collaboration. Where can
yeah,
people be actually a part of something? As
yeah,
soon as you can involve them, where can they be a part? And
Mm,
sometimes that's simple exercises around, right, what are we no longer going to be doing anymore? What does this change mean we are going to be
yeah,
doing?
yeah,
What are the things we don't know, but let's have a discussion?
yeah,
And what are the things that we could all contribute to or do differently?
yeah,
And I think when people are given a chance to shape stuff,
yeah,
you get buy-in. I often call it, what's the difference between ownership and authorship? We don't
yeah,
just ask people to own the change. We give them authorship. We give them a chance to be a part of what that might really look like. So
yeah,
I think it's helpful. There are some things you're not precious about.
yeah,
You're really open-minded about how it works. This is changing, but I really don't care, where you put the coffee machine, but it can't stay where it is.
yeah,
But other than that, it's up to you. So I
yeah,
think thinking about ownership versus authorship is really helpful.
yeah. That's helpful. Yeah,
And then be consistent. So there's kind of three C's, consult, collaborate where you can, and be consistent.
yeah,
Consistent in your message, consistent in what you say and what you don't say,
yeah,
consistent in, if you've said this is definitely going to happen, make sure it does, or you'll lose people. And I think those things are kind of my three things that really, if you want to shape change, those are then of course, there's lots
yeah.
of little subheadings under those, but yeah,
Those are the big headings. Yeah,
consult,
yeah.
collaborate, and be consistent in how you're approaching it, what your message is, and consistent in your communication.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the reality as well, isn't it, in churches, change just doesn't just happen by one person, doesn't it? It happens by a group, doesn't it? And that
Yes.
group
Yeah.
carry that into all the corners of the church and bring people with them. And you're right, there is some momentum that builds with it. And yeah, those are really helpful, which is great. Um, let's talk about kind of the real resistant person who who is a stickler, and we've always done this ministry, and I talk to so many leaders about having to add another C to that, having to have some courage to challenge some of the historic or the norms, all these things
Yeah.
that we face in churches
Yeah.
and the history. um Real resistance, how do you carefully, with care, deal with something like that?
You mean rather than using Disney's phrase, if you can't find your happiness here, go and find it elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think it's a
yeah.
real challenge. Yeah, I think I just go back to the thing about loss.
Okay.
For most people who are the greatest resistors, they're going to lose something in it.
Mm,
And when I go into organizations, and that's not just churches, and we've talked about great resistance to to change. Actually, some of what I'll then say to people, so what have you lost? What's been
yeah,
lost? And that
yeah,
process it doesn't actually take very long. People go, oh no, Rachel, you can't ask them that. It's going to be really
yeah,
depressing.
yeah,
And I said, well, let's just try it. And we almost kind of write down everything. If it's a group, we've just put on a flip chart.
mm,
And it might fill till 3 pages. Hopefully it doesn't. But often what I find at the end of that is people just want to know. They just want everyone to know, I've lost this. Do you know that?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's acknowledgement. And it sounds a bit simple, but the reality is that's what I've seen.
yeah,
It's a grief. And I saw someone recently who had someone on their team who was massively resistant, really undermining their authority,
mm,
and they had said the key question that they had asked that person is, what is it that I have done that has grieved you?
yeah,
A
yeah,
beautiful question.
yeah,
Beautiful question. And that opened just the door to this.
yeah.
Well, this has
Just to
happened, that's
unlock that.
happened.
Yeah,
And in that was the threat of, in this change, I might not have the position that I had before. And
yeah,
actually for that person that wasn't the case. But I think in church, often people, the roles they fill, the roles that they have, the volunteer, they're very passionate and driven to do them. And the
yeah,
thought of change and perhaps losing that, for some authority, for some, recognition, can
yeah,
be really hard. So we need to be sensitive to that. It can't stop us making change.
yeah, yeah,
But I 100% believe for most people who very strongly resist, it's about something that they are losing and that hasn't been acknowledged.
yeah,
Uh, and yeah, some people, they just, you'll find, so when have you ever embraced change, and you'll find they never ever have.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
And,
Yeah.
you can't win everyone over, but I would definitely, yeah, say step back, how or ask people that lovely question,
Yeah.
what are you losing in this?
Yeah.
And is there anything I can, you know,
Yeah.
do to help you see that differently? Or what would happen if you saw this differently? I think sometimes we have to challenge people's assumptions,
Yeah.
challenge
Yeah.
their limited belief that this is a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, find their sweet spot and speak into that, and
Yeah.
that's where we need discernment and wisdom and often insight, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think often we can really pray about people and ask the Lord to help us see what is
Yeah.
that, and I think frequently, and I know it and I've seen it, God will sometimes give us insight into what that is causing that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I think I see it with myself as well as I reflect on it myself. Is that I can develop some strong preferences about how things are done,
Mm,
and you have to remind yourself actually these are preferences actually, and part of what God has called a leader to do is to lead that church, isn't it? And so I want to submit to those leaders and I want to follow their leadership, and
yeah,
so that means that sometimes my preferences have to die, don't they?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think if I feel like I've got a voice, and this goes back to your consultation stuff, if I feel like I've got a voice, if I could be asked, have we missed something here that you're
mm,
feeling, that that this is really, your resistance is because we might have missed something. Tell us what it is.
yeah,
Tell us what it
yeah,
is, and giving
yeah,
people that room does sound right, because these things turn into, you know, people leaving or church splits, don't they?
yeah,
And you pull the thread back to what was it actually about originally, and you're like, how did we get here? Um,
yeah.
because the ramifications seem so extreme, don't they? Sometimes in these things, people leaving churches and then they never go back to church because they've had a bad experience.
Yeah, I
That's
think it's
common,
the
isn't it?
history, isn't it? The history is so
Yeah,
important. That's why I say I think in church it's different.
yeah,
People may have been around for years, and for new leaders or people who are new to that may not have known the history or something that failed spectacularly before or
yeah,
something like that. So you're absolutely right. We've got to be explorers a bit,
yeah, yeah,
mine down a bit into what's behind it all.
yeah. That curiosity piece
Mm,
is there, and I think
mm.
we're talking about there's no formula is there to change, and we started by saying we've not seen this being done great in organizations, let alone churches, and um but I guess I want to kind of finish this conversation thinking about the culture
Yeah,
and actually helping people to realize that actually the church is going to change,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
And actually, how do we build that into our culture, that it's okay to put some preferences to bed, but it's also okay to grieve the losses and to
yeah,
have the time to do that.
yeah.
Um, and so talk to me a little bit about culture, because this isn't just about decisions, is it? And bringing change.
No, no,
It
and I
is
think
culture.
it is culture, and it is about trust.
Yeah, trust is a big thing.
People
Yeah,
move at the pace that the trust is there, to be honest.
yeah,
And are we building a culture where we value and appreciate that change is important? And
yeah,
unless you're in the way back, Outer Hebrides or somewhere, most
yeah,
people will relate to the fact that change happens.
yeah.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, when we challenge people about change and say, "So, you still
Mm,
driving the car you had when you were
mm,
17? Have
mm,
you?"
mm.
Are you still wearing the clothes you had in I mean, some I
Yeah.
have to be careful on that one, but, you know, there are
Yeah,
things where people go, "Of course not,"
yeah,
but
yeah,
and so
yeah,
sometimes I think we have to nicely,
yeah,
disrupt that, "Come on, we
yeah,
know change is important," but
yeah,
I think we have to appreciate that we need to do that well, and I I think any church that is building a culture where people are consulted and
yeah,
collaborated with, how we do our comms is really important.
yeah,
How we celebrate
yeah,
change, how we recognize when things have gone
yeah,
really well is really important.
yeah, yeah,
Most organizations are
yeah,
terrible at recognizing success and celebrating
yeah,
change. And so I also think we have to build a culture that celebrates when there has been change
yeah,
and acknowledges when things have perhaps been difficult, but we've come through those.
yeah,
Um, maybe occasionally we need to show pictures of what the past looked like, Gavin, and
Yeah.
just make people
Yeah. Yeah.
reminded, oh yeah, actually no, change is a good thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think it is, you know, we've got to create a culture where we consult people early enough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're in a culture that's massively resistant, find out what's happened previously, because
Yeah.
something would have done it.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are key players that you need to identify and find out what their thing has
Yeah.
been.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
we start telling the same story.
Yeah.
Um, but I think collaborate honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes what do people hate? They hate phony change. And I think some cultures people say, well, you know, we let everybody know and we collaborate, and
Mm.
actually they don't.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there is what would call radical collaboration and honesty. You know,
Yes.
we do that well, and we communicate that stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
consistently, and we're not afraid to have the difficult
Yeah.
conversations around
Yeah.
things that are difficult.
Yeah.
And I think in shaping culture, we have to model. Anybody who's in a leadership role has got to model those things. Right?
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Consult people,
Yeah.
be someone who values consultation, not just for the sake of keeping everyone
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
You know,
There's,
is
yeah.
honest and radical in that, I think is
Yeah.
really important.
I think the trusting is really, really
Mm,
helpful. Yeah.
mm.
Not to be defensive, and
Yep.
we can be quick, can't we, to be defensive?
Mm,
And I think, yeah, that's right. In giving people the time and space, the pace. So this is a helpful conversation, isn't it? And just
mm.
to, if anything, if you're listening to the podcast, have it on your radar, because you are going to be in the middle of change, or thinking about change, or picking up the pieces from poorly managed change. It's just going to live with you all week. And here's some helpful thoughts for you. And Rachel, I really appreciate you kind of coming on, and I know you're so knowledgeable about this stuff and so helpful. And you've disrupted some people's days today, I'm sure.
Good. I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed our conversation, Gavin. And it's so important
Yeah,
because, you know, change is going to happen whether we like it or not. But
yeah,
we can do that well, and with God's
yeah.
grace, it can, you know, be transformational for church and for growth of church. But
Absolutely right.
doing it well and planning it well really is key to its successful
Yeah.
outcome.
And I've known churches who've gone, right, we need some agents of change,
Yeah.
and we need some people who
Yeah.
can come in and care for people as well. And they're actually thinking about those different gifts that they need on team or in a voluntary capacity, that will, we want you to think about this. We
Mm,
want you to talk to people about this. We want you to care for people.
yeah.
Um, and yet others were saying, yeah, we want to give you license to think of as many ideas as you can,
Yeah.
and all of that. So it really is a leadership thing, and I think this is a really good thing. So if you've got any questions, or you'd like to follow up with us at the church office or with Rachel, then please do check out Rachel's website, and I know she's available to serve in different ways in a business. And maybe you'd like to get a quote for something, who knows. Maybe that might be the next step. And maybe
You
you'd like
always
to
say first 10 minutes are free, Gavin.
first 10 minutes are free. I like that. And she'll be with us at the UCAN conference in June, and I know there's still a couple of places available to come along to that conference. It's a 3-day residential conference, and not only are the sessions great, but you meet people who are doing similar roles to you, that you can have a conversation like, how did you take your church through this process? How did you help them change this? What did you do? What was good? What was not? Those really kind of practical questions of peers doing the role is really useful. So please do get in touch at info@thechurchoffice.co.uk. So Rachel, thanks for coming on and being with us. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Gavin. Looking forward to being with you at the conference in June.
It'll be good. Yeah. And if you've got any questions for the podcast, any topics that you think, do you know what, I would love to hear somebody talk on this, then please get in contact with us. We would love to make this as good and as helpful as we can to you. So we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the podcast. Goodbye, everyone.